Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube. I'm back to continue my read along review for To Be Night and Beguile. Book 5, Chapter 2. At winter's edge, a cold wind swept across the island of Welshport. There was a frost that signaled the beginning of what would be a very chilling season. The leaves had changed color and withered away on dormant trees. Their bright green signs of summer were now golden shades of yellow and orange on what was left of sticks and branches. At St. Catherine's Church, the corners of the windows high above the door had fogged over with condensation. Inside, toward the back of the church, a warm fire warmed the room. Sitting in the pew facing a rack of glittering candles burning below, a large tree marble statue of the Virgin Mother was Aurora Ashby Jordan, whispering prayers to herself while the child inside of her adjusted itself in its warm little world inside of her. Her child, the one she conceived with Caspian Castor, had grown approximately in oh, exponentially, sorry, in the several early months of her pregnancy. I'm gonna guess the child isn't growing normally, just a guess. By the date on her calendar, she was only 4 months along, but her body showed seven. I was right. Okay. Or felt there was an obvious strangeness to this new child inside of her, and the fact it was growing so fast made her worry beyond what her imagination would allow. So she prayed every day, hoping for a miracle. Miss Jordan, Father Donovan Ryan whispered as he entered the nave of the church. Aurora opened her eyes from her prayers and stood up to greet him with a soft smile, her mind forgetting why she was there when she saw the friendly father's handsome face. He immediately noticed her stomach. My, he said as he reached over to touch it. Her smile quickly turned to a worried look when she suddenly remembered the child. He's growing so fast, Father, Aurora said. I don't even know how this could be. He? Father Ryan wondered. Aurora shrugged. It can't be a girl, not at this size, Aurora deduced. I've been praying every day. I think about how this child was conceived and who it was conceived with, the manner in which it how happened. Father, should I worry for this baby? Should I worry about what it'll be once it arrives? What it'll be? Father Ryan wondered. Father, please don't make me say that out loud. Not here, not in this church. We both know who the Father is. Even thinking about him makes me physically ill, Aurora reminded. Of course, Father Ryan replied. He too didn't want to go back to what happened at Terramore and with Caspian. We have to have faith in what God's plan is for this child and for you once it is born. We are all born innocent, and this child, no matter who its parents are, will be the same. No one is born evil. Michael Myers, no, not even the child of Caspian Cassador, Father Ryan said. How can we be sure? Gregory said, entering the church silently and eavesdropping on their conversation. Aurora and Donovan turned to Gregor, who stood in the center of the church just below the glowing chandelier. Caspian isn't a factor anymore. To be honest, he's gone, and all I worry about is the child and what he'll do or be, or I don't know. I can't even explain it out loud without sounding insane, Aurora said. Aurora's safety is my utmost concern, Father, and we both know the type of safety which is more Which is most concerning, Gregory added. Spiritually, Father Ryan confirmed. Gregory nodded. I can assure you, Father Ryan continued, turn, turned toward both. He said, turning back to Gregory, Caspian is no longer a threat to anyone. The creature that was inside of him is gone. I have no doubts about that. The Caspian that we all knew, that thing is dead. Dead, Aurora said. Yes, dead, but how can a demon die? She asked. Now that Caspian left this earth, I don't know if I can sleep at thinking that maybe that creature left the body of Caspian when he died and entered someone else, maybe this child, or added, finally saying the evil name out loud, breaking her own pact. Father Ryan had kept the secret, perhaps for the best of everyone involved. The night of Caspian's exorcism, he had said that the creature was gone, dead and gone, but everyone interpreted that as Caspian was dead too, when in truth the body of the man, the real Caspian, was only burned in a strange, spontaneous combustion that occurred during the exorcism. Father Ryan was able to sneak the man out of the mansion and put him at Church Hill Green, locked away under the protection of the doctors there, including Aurora's own son, Nicholas. Only those few people, Father Ryan, Dr. Ward, Dr. Jordan, and Dr. Hoffman, knew the man lived. The priest hoped the secret would stay that way for everyone's sake. You don't have to worry, Father Ryan said again, holding Aurora's hand. Just pray, keep your strength, and know that God is watching over you. There is nothing to fear, Aurora. Nothing, Father Ryan added. Aurora looked over the priest's shoulders to look Gregory in the eyes. He seemed to believe Father Ryan, and she trusted Gregory more than anyone else in all of Welshport. She squeezed Donovan Ryan's hand and turned back to the statue of the Virgin Mary, staring down to her followers with her arms stretched wide and her eyes clouded with what seemed like tears. Aurora knelt on the soft pray bench directly in front of the glowing rack of candles and red glass, and Ryan followed her in prayer, kneeling next to her while Gregory stood in the back of almost as if he was keeping guard of the pair. Outside, the wind continued to blow a frosty ice cold across the two islands of Welshport, and good. The edge of winter was a bitter pill to swallow. And this ritual area of the Northeast, and soon bitterness, would show not only in the acts of nature, but in the acts of man. That evening, a few hours after the sun went down, the warm earth in Sebastian's dark bedroom and the Goods family cottage burned warm and bright, keeping the small rook a perfect temperature, while the air over Good Island chilled the condition on the window sill to frost. In the bed, Sebastian and Jacqueline made love, their two bodies interwoven and joined together, connecting over and over mentally and physically. Her mocha skin glistened in the light of the fire as she looked down on Sebastian laying below her and held on her hands. She felt every bead of sweat trickle down the crest of her spine. They had fallen in love, a special kind of love that neither had expected, especially being two beings of the shadows. Sebastian, for his part, never thought he'd find love again after Evie and meeting Jacqueline. Felt like a sign of a new life, as life he thought he'd lost. Jacqueline fell back down to the bed and lay next to the man she only saw at night. She ran her fingers the lines of his muscles, of his shoulders, then ran them up his body and kissed him one more time as her fingers then reached his thick golden hair. There were candles all around them, illuminating the area around the bed, casting them a deep orange light. He sat up and looked down into her brown eyes, and reflecting a candle nearest her, dripping with wet wax. "You're exquisite," he said. She smiled back shyly. "I have to tell you something," he said, laying back down next to her. She rolled over to look at him in the eyes, and their bodies became tangled in the sheets and awaited what it was. "Mary told me what happened with Gabriel, and, well, I was hoping, since it was you who cast the spell on Gabriel, you would have been the one to tell me," Sebastian said. Jacqueline gulped. Mary had betrayed her so quickly, too. It hadn't even been a day since Mary, and Philip made their pact to keep the truth from Sebastian. The truth of the spell of protection gone wrong, and rendering the child without his sense of hearing. But Sebastian's reaction to the truth perplexed Jacqueline. His son was deaf because of her, and she seemed strangely calm. The monster she expected to be released at the disturbing news of his son's misfortune was nowhere to be found. "Sebastian, I can explain everything. I really can. I just," the witch Jacqueline began before her vampire lover interrupted. "What's there to explain? It's a small cabin. We're bound to overhear others' conversations on occasion," Sebastian said, revealing he figured she overheard his request to Mary for the spell when she decided to do it for him in Mary's place. But what you did was so kind and so good, it made me fall deeper in love with you," he added. "But if you just hear me," she paused, and his words finally registered. "What did you say?" He smiled. "Which part?" "Well, all of it," she laughed. "But about Gabriel, you said it was a kind thing." "Of course," Mary said, "that you did the protection spell on him in her place. I want to thank you for that." Jacqueline then realized Mary had lied. She got up from the bed, wrapping her nude body in one of the white sheets, and went over to the fire. She jabbed a long black poker into the simmering wood, breaking free crimson embers that relit the flame again. "When did you speak to Mary?" Jacqueline asked, her eyes never leaving the reignited fire. "Just after sundown tonight. She brought me a rabbit," Sebastian said, sitting up. "Jacqueline, what is it? Are you hungry?" Are you angry? She told me before you could. What else did she tell you?" Jacqueline wondered. Her body language seemed off. Sebastian felt something in his body that he hadn't felt before, coming from the woman he loved. Since becoming a creature of the shadows that he had learned he had new abilities, senses, almost telepathic powers. They were strong connections that allowed him to be in touch with someone's emotions, but only when he was truly connected to them. He was invested in Jacqueline and could practically smell the fear in her words as she realized that if anything she said differed from Mary's story, Sebastian would instantly know it was a lie. He got up from the bed and reached for the linen, his white linen pants he usually wore to bed that had been flung over a dark case and knotted the strings as his slim waist. He went down to the fire and sat cross-legged with Jacqueline. She was emitting a wave of nerves as powerful as the heat from the earth. He grabbed her hand and squeezed. "Tell me what happened," he asked. "Nothing. Oh, nothing." has happened, Sebastian. I was just curious as to what Mary said. You'll have to forgive me. All those years alone in that house in Boston, I still have trouble trusting people, and having Mary explain what happened sets me into a bit of a trust panic, she said, giggling nervously. I'm working on that, Jacqueline explained, covering. Sebastian what he believed wasn't sure he believed her. What he was sensing from this new woman in his life, the heat, the passion, the lust, and now suddenly deception, he too had trust issues, but felt like he and Jacqueline were kismet. They must have been meant to be together, especially after all they'd been through, together and apart, and just like that, a sudden secret seemed to be afoot. If there was something else, you'd tell me, wouldn't you? He asked, with an innocent twinge in his vampire voice. She touched his face, and she felt cheekbones and gave strong cheekbones. He gave him such a sexy, powerful gaze, his lips planted firmly in the center. With his wide face, she kissed them, and from her seat on the floor, she scooted to his lap and sat. You can trust me, she whispered into his ear as the wood cracked and popped in the fire. There's nothing more. Gabriel is protected, she added, hiding the fact that she made the baby deaf. She kissed him again deeply. He let out a small moan of delight as they made love again in front of the roaring fire. Sebastian's mind couldn't help wonder off into the feelings he was getting just before their second round of passionate love making. He has he was keen on his sense. He was no longer the young lost vampire unsure of his powers and abilities. Yeah, so what we're being told here is that Sebastian has learned a lot more about his powers and has gotten more control over him, including the anger. So he's not just some bloodthirsty vampire. Sure, there's that. Sure, I'm sure he has his moments. There was no confusion. The new woman he loved so passionately was clearly hiding something. After they made love again, Jacqueline curled up in her fur blanket Sebastian had brought down from the bed and wrapped her in it. He went over to his bedroom window and opened it, letting an icy sea air that crept over Good Island in the salty swishness. Drinking the dark red blood of a rabbit from a tin cup, he stared out into the woods that surrounded the good family cabin. A dripple of blood fell from his mouth, and his mind again went into a dark center. His negative thoughts twisted and churned in his mind like a storm brewing offshore. What exactly was Jacqueline hiding? What made things worse? Could his cousin Mary be lying too? You can trust me, Sebastian, remembered Jacqueline's voice whispering. But could he? Sebastian was having his doubts. Now, on that, no one, not even a powerful witch, could hide the vibrations of their emotions from him. Sebastian's black eyes turned to their cold blue as he wiped the blood from his mouth, and watched her sleep. Sleep like an angel, he thought. But even angels fall, he then whispered. In a lantern lit sitting room, one of the last rooms at Terramore without electricity, Evie Jordan Lord carefully poured a cup of Earl Grey tea with her very pregnant mother, Aurora. The mother and daughter sat facing each other, one a new mother and the other pregnant with her third child much later in her life than she expected. They discussed the ups and downs of motherhood. Evie, for her part, was clear that she welcomed any help now that she was a single mother to a child with a hearing loss. Damn spells. I just wish there was something we could do to help him more as he grows, Aurora said of her grandson Gabriel. When I spoke to Dr. Ward, he said that there was a slim chance that the therapies and maybe some medicine in the future, or even the advent of prosthetics, that could regain some of his hearing. But there just isn't anything to tell us right now that those things would be beneficial to Gabriel. All we can do is hope. Evie explained of her early doctor's appointment. I wish I had been more careful, she added. Evie, Gabriel's hearing loss wasn't your fault, Aurora replied. Is that what you think? That there is something you did that caused this? I don't know. My pregnancy was full and so much turmoil, and then that night he was born. Evie began before she stopped herself from going back to the dark memory of Gabriel's birth, parallel to Caspian's exorcism. Honey, life is full of turmoil at the time. Every day, granted, Welshport seems to have more than its fair share of it, but trust me, there was absolutely nothing you did or could have done to stop what happened to your beautiful baby. It is perfect no matter what, Aurora said, reaching for her daughter's hand over the over her own large baby bump. Evie smiled at her mother. She knew Aurora was right. It was an obvious truth that there was nothing Evie had done to cause it. What they didn't know was that they were partly wrong. Gabriel's cause of hearing loss wasn't some sort of natural occurrence or bad luck. It was indeed caused by something better, someone, Evie's new friend, Jacqueline Gray, and a spell gone terribly wrong. Evie looked down under her hand and saw her mother's large belly. She took her head as she just realized she was pregnant, but of course had known for a while. The strangest of the moment was due to the size of Aurora's stomach, so much larger than the day before. Mother, Evie said with a slight grin, are you sure your timing is right? Evie asked. My timing? Evie pointed to her belly. Oh, I know. It's like every day I'm one more day closer to birth. You probably are, but I'm obviously certain on the timing, Aurora pointed out. Ah, Evie giggled, reaching for their plate of small lemon cake she brought in with the tea and moved them away from her mother. Oh, stop, Aurora giggled. I haven't gotten that large either. I don't know what it is. What about the decision? A while back, you weren't sure if it was a good idea to raise a child yourself, being that it was conceived in such a traumatizing way. Caspian shouldn't be known as the father, and of course, you don't have any explanation, Evie said. I don't see how else I would explain this baby without telling the truth to anyone who really asked. And if they heard the truth, they'd only think I've gone mad and take the baby from me to protect me anyway. So why even go to the route of allowing someone else to raise it? I did decide what I wanted to do, Aurora said about keeping or giving the child up for adoption. Evie waited to hear her decision, but Aurora only sipped from her porcelain teacup with the deliciously painted lilies. Do you want to tell me? The daughter asked. I do, Aurora said with a long pause. Evie, I don't know how you and your brother are going to take the news. I decided a week or two ago and wasn't sure when to tell you, the two of you. Mother, we love you. Whatever you decide, we'll support, regardless of the child's father. You're its mother, and something that is a part of us is a part of us. We'll do what we can to help you either way, you said. You really think Nick feels the same way? Aurora asked. Of course, Evie replied quickly. You're our mother. We love you. Aurora smiled, and a tear came to her eye. She put down the lily painted teacup carefully on the table and reached for her daughter's hand again and held it tightly. When it came when it all came out of her mouth, in the glow of the orange and yellow flickering gaslights of the room, I'm going to do my best and raise the child. Whatever happens, this baby wasn't asked to be conceived in a way that anyone would assume was a normal or fair, but it wouldn't be fair to just try and forget about the baby just because of something it had no control over. I'll raise the child alone. I'm wondering about something. Hopefully, I'll get John on for an interview, and I got some questions here. I don't know when this is all over. Evie, again, they could be answered too by the time this is, but not this chapter, but by the time the story ends. Evie squeezed he her mother's hand, showing her solidarity. No, not alone. We'll raise the baby together, all as family, and it'll never know its horrible past. Because we're speaking of fairness. Did I just lose my place? God damn it. Oh, fairness. We should be fair and let him or her grow up with a clean slate, never ever knowing Caspian's name. Do you think we can do that? Or should? Or wondered. Wouldn't it be wrong for the child never know its true father? Caspian was a monster. Eve replied, he wanted my child dead for some sacrificial evil thing. No, this baby does not deserve to have that thing known as its father. One day, when he or she asks, Evie paused, unsure how to finish their sentence. We'll cross that bridge when it comes, Aurora replied. Yes, when it comes, Evie answered back. Both were still unsure to speak of the future when all things in their past had proven to be uncertain. Life in Welshport had taught them never plan the future. Life has a funny way of changing those plans for the worse. As Evie then scooted over on the fluffy and flowery sofa to hug her mother, Aurora winced in pain and grabbed her large baby bump. The pain felt like a knife slitting her skin and going deep inside her stomach. Then the pain became intense, like a burning of her flesh. Evie backed away from the hug and saw her mother suddenly full of sweat. Are you okay? What can I do? Do you need to have a doctor called? The daughter asked. Aurora couldn't speak. With the pain, she reached for the front of the laces of her corset that held in her growing tummy under her overshirt. The bodice split open, and Aurora untucked the white nightshirt from the long brown dress and revealed her large belly to Evie. The image Evie saw shocked her to her core. There, right in front of both women's eyes, under Aurora's peach-toned skin, was the moving baby's visible hand pushing up through the womb, and in the long swipes from under the skin, the tiny fingers were almost visible as five little bumps pulling tugging on the skin from inside. It was an eerie sight, a strange and odd alien like from under the woman's stomach. Evie hadn't experienced this when she was pregnant with Gabriel. Then, as soon as it happened, the baby seemed to roll over and go back to sleep. The pain stopped. My goodness, Evie said, or only stared at her daughter with sudden thoughts of change in her mind about raising the child herself. The image of the child, seemingly conscious of the conversation that was happening just outside its warm, safe, in tree home, frightened and soon to be third time mother, but she was resolved her in choice. She would raise the child of the evil Caspian castle, no matter what. As the night rolled on, Nicholas Jordan and Ashia Hoffman had a late night shift at Welshport Hope Hospital. They were still in a close relationship. Let's see. Albeit strained due to Ashia keeping the fact that she discovered Nick's former flame, Alice Winterbourne, could be somehow alive somewhere in the world based on the book of the life found at Alice's brother's house. The book of life listed the names of all the Dunnian people, the ancestors of both Matthew and Alice, and the possibilities of their lives being restored as was a custom in their culture. None of this, in truth, had been discovered to be true. Alice had not shown herself, and for that matter, neither had Matthew, who recently perished in the sinking of his ship. Nick, for his part, forgave Ashia for keeping the secret despite the fact she showed signs of being deceptive. But he did love her, and he found that forgiveness was a better virtue than forging a vendetta over someone he cared for so much. Ashia came from around the corner of a hallway into a large open lobby of the hospital. Her footsteps echoed, and there, as she clip clopped across the pale marble floor towards where Nicholas was standing, looking over charts with the nurse. "Busy night," she said with a grin. "You too, huh?" he answered, "and it's just going to get busier. I have a shift at Churchill Green with Rebecca and the other patient," Nick added, carefully hiding the identity of Cassian, to whom ever was listening. Nicholas handed over the charts to the nurse, who scurried away to her own rounds. Then Ashia pulled Nicholas aside. She was worried for them. They'd been through a very rough patch together, and Nick had promised her in the late summer that he had indeed forgiven her, but she could still tell things were different between the two. She, feeling a bit embarrassed to talk about something so personal at work, told Nick what she was sensing from him a wall. I know I know I should have been more open with you about everything. But I just need some time to deal with it all. I mean, not only did I have to deal with Matthew's sudden death and my nephew's hearing condition and Caspian and my mother, I had to take another hit closer to home. The idea that you kept something from me, even as significant as that book, really affected me, Nick explained. Yeah, Nick explained. "It's all understandable, Nick. Your family is very important to you. But you said you forgave me. How can we move on with each other if you keep holding that over my head?" she wondered. "It's not fair to you, I know. What can we do then? How can I prove to you that it was just a slight of conscience, that I would never hide something from you like that again? In fact, I told you about it quickly," as she replied. Nick looked at her with a tilt in his head, and his eyes narrowed to her particular choice of words. "Does that mean," he paused, "what does that mean? Were you thinking of actually keeping it from me longer, or never telling me?" "No, I mean, of course I would have told you," she said eventually. He answered. "Nicholas, you're putting words in my mouth. What I did was a mistake, and I only held off telling you because I needed to understand it myself. I don't think that it's too hard to understand from your end, she replied. Nick put his hands up. It was over. He didn't want to rehash it anymore. He reiterated that he forgave her, even though in the back of his mind he decided to be much more cautious of things around as he wanted to be sure there was no more deception on anyone's part, but especially hers. He had other worries, much more dangerous ones to deal with. Let's just take a break from this. Everything is fine, he said. We're good, she asked cautiously. We're good, he replied. Then even her then he gave her a peck on the lips. I gotta run. I have Rebecca Lord to deal with now. How is she? There are days where she's back in the saddle that of that sharp mind of hers. Then there are days where I can't figure out if she's lucid, even enough to even speak to Dr. Ward. Wants me to keep medicating her, but I don't see that as a proper way to deal with someone who I know for in fact has a mind as clear as a bell. There's something that interferes with the way she deals with her life on a day-to-day basis, and it has to be the man in the next room. Nick explained as she had looked around the lobby and whispered a secret patient's name. Caspian? Nick nodded. He's powerless now, I can tell. I don't know who the man is or where he came from, but he's not what he was when we all first met him. The only problem is he still holds some kind of physical control over Rebecca. Not supernatural. That's the bond I need to break. Nick offered. Should you separate them? If he's the cause of her backtracking or regression after your therapies, why not take him out of the equation? Nick asked. She asked. Nick took a breath and nodded. He knew that it was the logical explanation, but he wanted to try something. He wanted to push Rebecca in a way that perhaps he had never pushed before. To Nick, removing Cassian might be the easy way out, and Rebecca would fall back into a pattern of allowing herself to eventually be taken over by someone else, some other charlatan man or woman who comes along promising supernatural solutions to Rebecca's world problems. I want to talk about that. That was bridge of Rebecca's mind Nick wanted to burn down with his therapy sessions. I think I'm going to do the opposite, Nick replied, to as she is surprised. I'm going to keep Cassian there, push her to her limits to see so that when her mind finally does heal from the trauma she endur- endured, she'll stop fearing him. She'll see him face to face to know that the man is nothing to her. She'll no longer fear him or hold him on some kind of pedestal meant for deities. It's going to be a long push, but I think if anyone can overcome it, it's Rebecca Lockwood Lord. Nick smiled and leaned down and kissed Ashia goodbye and told her he'd see her in the morning. She smiled back, still feeling his plump lips on hers, even though they'd lifted seconds early and watched the man she loved so much go off to Churchill Green, the mental ward of Welshport Hope. Standing at her hosp- Standing at her hospital bed window, staring out at the increasingly dark, cold night, Rebecca breathed on the ice-like glass of her window, pushing out a puff of warm air. The warm air on the cold glass formed a blurry circle, where Rebecca carefully scrawled the word freedom into a perfect cursive handwriting. She watched out of her Churchill Green hospital room. She wanted her freedom. Mm. She missed her family. She missed her life outside the heavy stone walls of the old hospital ward where patients barely slept, where medication was tossed out like candy, and where the ghosts of those patients past were alive and well and haunted them every chance they got. At least the last part was true for Rebecca. As she stood there at the window and watched her writing slowly disappear, as it could, she saw something flicker in the distance in the garden beyond her room. She put her face to the glass and covered both sides of her eyes with her hands, blocking any light from her room. It was snow. The first snow of fall of the year was slowly coming down and falling onto the lingering summer green grass. She smiled. A snowfall to her seemed hopeful and special, no matter where she was. Its fleece was white as snow, a voice said from Rebecca's room door. She turned and found once again her real life living ghost Caspian, her hospital mate. Get out, she replied coldly. You're not here. You're not in this room with me. Caspian, still healing from his burns over his body from spontaneous combustion, with his exorcism, wheeled himself over to Rebecca, still standing at her room window. Now, we know that that isn't true, Rebecca. I am here. I am alive, albeit only in pieces, Caspian replied. I want you to leave this room and stop bothering me. Do you understand? I don't want anything to do with you any more. Ever again, Rebecca told him quickly, rushing around his chair and landing on her bed. From what I understand from the notes Dr. Ward and Dr. Jordan have shared with me in my own session with them, you and I are very close and have truly went through something terrible. I only want to end the terrors in your mind, Cassim replied. Rebecca, who tried as best as she could to keep herself from looking at him, perked up. She wasn't sure if it was being if he was being deceptive or truthful with what he was saying. Did he truly remember what happened? Who he was at the time of their acquaintance? She finally turned her face to meet his eyes and saw the man again there in front of her. His burned scars were healing. He was disfigured, but there was he was still. Again, just as he was from the day they found each other in the hospital garden. The same eyes, the same voice. But there, she think of it different now. You are evil, she said softly. No, he replied just as softly. I don't know what I was, but the real me, isn't that monster. I don't know what or how and when, but somewhere in my life, something happened that the person you met took over. I'm not him, Rebecca. I'm not. Once everyone discovers you're here, they'll come and take you away. That's it. That's what I have to do. I have to make people aware that you're here, Rebecca exclaimed. Rebecca, listen to me. No one knows I am alive. The doctors and Father Ryan have all agreed to protect that information, and if you want to tell everyone that wouldn't believe you, it's only fair. Don't you think that I get a fair shot at healing without any interference? Jacob knows. Yes, my son knows. Jacob will tell everyone, and they'll come for you and take you from here, from this place, constantly in my face, Rebecca replied. Jacob thinks you're bad, Cass replied. He wouldn't tell anyone anything you say, not the words of a madwoman. Jacob doesn't think she's mad. Jacob knows better. Jacob knows she's healing. Um, no, unless Caspian honestly believes that, we'll see. There it was, Cassian's glimmer of wickedness rising to the surface. She knew it was in him. She could tell, but just as soon as it appeared, the cruel intentions of the man she once knew became swept up again in the kindness of the person she she he had become post exorcism. I just want a shot, a new lease on life, and I think that we could both use that. We've both hurt people, and we both need to start over. Caspian, for what you did to me and my family, the only thing you deserve is to lay in the bottom of a grave and leave me alone forever, Rebecca replied. When when we finally see, Rebecca, that the powers that overtook me were not were not of my doing, but at the same time they brought us together, you and I. We are a pair. We're here together. It was meant for us to cross paths again. At least I think so, Catherine said to Rebecca's disgust. Together, you and I. What are you talking about? You tried to have me kill my great grandson, she screamed. No, Caspian shouted from the wheelchair. It was not me. Enough, Nick yelled as he entered the room. Rebecca jumped from her bed and grabbed hold of the collar of Nick's white doctor's coat. She pulled Nick close and began to ramble something feverish, her mind slipping deeper into a strange world that she couldn't get out of. She saw the man, the monster that changed her life forever in front of her, wanting to mend fences. And this is what Nick wanted for the two of them to sort things out, to heal together. But it was making Rebecca's spirit even deeper into her psychosis. You need to remove him, Dr. Jordan. You need to remove him far from me. Drown him, burn him, inject him with poison, something, anything to get rid of him. He's going to kill me. I don't see the light past the sun, past the moon. Every time I turn, he's there. He listens to me. He watches me. He talks to me like as if he's someone new or something kind, but I can sense his evil side. Nick, I can feel it like the fire in earth, like the waves of the ocean splashing across my body. The power is there. The power is still over me. Medicate her, Caspian said with an eyebrow lift. Do us all a favor. Enough, Nick said to him. Rebecca, Miss Lord, sit down, please. Just sit down here and breathe. Just breathe in slowly and breathe out slowly. You have to get a hold of yourself or things will not get better for you. Do you understand me? Nick asked, carefully touching a hypodermic needle in his coat pocket. He was prepared to use a plan B. If you do not remove him, I will kill him, Rebecca said, her mind clearly splitting over Caspian's presence. Please leave, Nick said, turning to Caspian, who wheeled himself out of the room, but stayed just beyond the door. Do you want something to help you sleep? Nick asked Rebecca. I want something to make him go away. You have that, Chess? Nick smiled. I need you to try, Mrs. Lord. Learning to face your fears will be good for you. Caspian cannot hurt you anymore. I promise you this, Nick replied. Becca looked at Nick. A young doctor so calm and so confident in the person in the same presence as Caspian, the man who ordered Rebecca to kill Nick's own nephew, Gabriel by Rebecca's hand, how she wondered, could be so easily around that man, that person, that burned and scarred monster. She couldn't figure it out, but agreed that perhaps something to help sleep would let her pass. You'll feel a pinch, Nick said, pricking Rebecca with the needle that carried the medication that would render Rebecca into a deep sleep in just minutes. She fell back on her bed. Her eyes slowly blinked until they closed for the night. The medication had worked. Nick waited just in case she woke up again. He was second guessing himself. The pushing for Rebecca to face Caston without medication, perhaps it was too soon, perhaps Ashia was right, as they should be separated. Then he came back to himself and thought he'd give it a few more days. The process was important to him, and to form a powerful wall in Rebecca's mind for her to understand that the supernatural events and her past were long gone. Cassian was truly no longer a powerful threat in the way that he once was. In fact, the man in the wheelchair, burned and charred from his demonic exorcism, was now just a regular man that perhaps was still a bit too creative with his manipulative ways, but those ways were not a sign of the devil, only that a man who knew how to twist his way through life with deception and cunning ways. Sleep stepping out onto the hall, there was Cassian once again to face Dr. Nick Jordan. Facing Rebecca is good for you too, Mr. Castor, but I think we need to reconfigure your approach. Do not meet her in her room anymore, only in common areas. She needs to feel safe in this space, Nick ordered. I don't understand why you'd want this. I don't remember anything from my time at Terramore, or even before that. I have very little memories of anything or who I am or who I come from. I just want I just have what you and Dr. Ward and Father Ryan have told me. How was pushing me and Rebecca together going to help either of us? Nick or Caspian wondered. It'll push the two of you to realize that there is no easy way out of this. You're both bound by your recent histories, and the only way to come to terms with the terrible things the two of you have done is to face them together and discuss them. Render them out of your own systems and atone for them. Medication of any kind of spiritual salvation or any kind of spiritual salvation from a priest will not do that. It is you and Rebecca that have to do that yourselves. It sounds strange, I understand, but I stand by it. I think it'll change you both for the good. As Nick slowly turned to leave, the man there in the hall, Cassian suddenly surprised him next. How's your mother? Caspian asked. Nick turned slowly to look into the man's face. My mother? Uncomfortable from the idea that Caspian was thinking of Aurora, the mother of your Caspian's unborn child. Dr. Ward told me, Caspian said. How is my child? Nick's eyes narrowed with anger. As much as I respect Dr. Ward, he made an error. You shouldn't be reminded of that part of your ex life. My mother is off limits. She has suffered enough, and this experiment with Rebecca is only about you, about what you and Rebecca did together. It has nothing to do with my mother. Stay away from her, Nick added. Yes, but in a way it does. I made her pregnant, didn't I? At the same time, Rebecca and I plotted to kill a child. I believe it's all related, Doctor, Caston replied. Nick's blood began to boil. Caspian again was showing his dark side, his cunning wit with a twinge of Stark to make everyone around him feel like their skin was crawling. Caspian raped Aurora in a way that was so purely evil that Nick wanted to never think of it again. Nick's okay, yeah, I read that part. Okay. I will I will tell you once more, Mr. Casper. Never speak of my mother again. The part of your life, pretend it never happened, no matter what Dr. Ward says. As for the child that was conceived, Nick paused. It's gone. Take it out of your mind, Nick ordered. Nick waited for an answer from Casman. Casman did not respond in words. He only nodded his head in agreement. As Nick began to walk away to check on other patients, Caspian wondered about the child. Nick said it was gone. Did he mean forever? Did the child die? Caspian, hospital patient with partial amnesia or not, needed to know. The child was a part of him, and somehow, some way, he was going to get an answer about Aurora and the baby Nick liked, if Nick liked it or not. Sorry. The next day, the snow had fallen significantly across Maine and blanketed Welshport and Good Island, masking the green grass and timing it gray with frost, and all of the terracotta signaled rooftops of the village to icy slabs. At Terramore, Evie was showing her new friend, Jacqueline, around the mansion's various sitting rooms and parlors. Jacqueline had never seen such opulence before. The ceilings in almost every room were like chandeliers painted with fes- frescoes of angels and heavenly words beyond the mortal one they all lived in. Jacqueline was there not only to get to know her new friend, but also to do some reconnaissance. She wanted to know about the woman Sebastian loved. She wanted to know just how much Evie had moved on with her life, or perhaps not moved on. The survival of Jacqueline's budding relationship with the vampire sleeping in the frosted over Good Island, depending on whether or not Evie was truly gone with him despite her not knowing Sebastian was even truly alive. And this is the library, Evie said, sliding open the doors to the library from an eternal entrance of an adjoining room. Jacqueline's eyes widened. She had never seen so many books. There could have been thousands of them, shelves upon shelves upon shelves, stacked so high only the ladder attached to the rail swung around the room could reach them. So many stories, Jacqueline whispered, just an earshot of Evie. I know Evie smiled. Thought when I moved in that I could probably read most of these and still never reach the end by the time I died. There are enough books here from our life stories. You'd have to live forever to read them, Jacqueline, a strange hint of Sebastian's everlasting life. No one would want that, not even to read the fabulous books in the world, Evie replied, ushering Jacqueline over to the sofas in the center of the library, not even if they were on art. Jacqueline smiled, touching on Evie's favorite topic. Evie bit her lip. Maybe for art books, she giggled. How did you get so interested in art? When we met, you said that you loved it, Jacqueline wondered. I didn't really know if I've always just gravitated toward I don't really know. I've always just gravitated towards amazing paintings and artists. And the museums in London are truly great places to sit for hours and learn. It also helped me sort of escape things, Evie said. Like what? Evie wasn't sure how to reply without giving away too much of her past, but just as a new friend, someone she wanted to like and be liked by in return, she had no idea Jacqueline was only pulling for information, only to use it for her own gain. The trust bonds is the strongest of all bonds that goes beyond just family ties. It's also including the connection of friends. Jacqueline, a manipulative person by nature, knew this. She knew she needed Evie to trust her, and Evie too innocently knew she wanted Jacqueline to like her and felt like they were true friends. Terramore and the life of a Lord woman was lonely enough. Jacqueline was a breath of fresh air. Evie revealed herself. My father worked a lot, and I mean a lot. He wasn't always successful at his work, and we were affluent and were comfortable in our lives there as a family. It always seemed so fragile. I never knew if things were not fine or not fine because my father was always out working to make sure we couldn't tell the difference. But we noticed. We could tell that there was a nervousness about losing everything. It put a strain on my parents, and thus a strain on my brother and me. Unspoken, of course. And museums and art was your escape from that? Jacqueline wondered. Evie nodded. Well, it's certainly better than my own life. Evie sipped her tea that Jan, the maid, had left her. Tell me what makes you, she said. I was born in Boston. I lived there all my life in a small area neighborhood called High Grove. Life was difficult. No escape through, though. I had to work hard. My parents died when I was 12, and I had to live the best way I could, the only way I could, vicariously through others. I survived a lot of cold, dark nights. Back then, Jacqueline revealed, we're both survivors, Evie said. I know my parents shielded me from what a lot of what I was growing up, but I could feel it. I never saw it. I never really was exposed to the hardships that were facing off and on, but the strain and stress, the anxiety was there all my life. And then it happened, she said. What happened? Jacqueline asked. My father died. Debt collectors came and told us everything. My father owed it was everything we had. My mother, brother, and I took up work, but it wasn't enough to pay back everything my father had borrowed in secret, Evie explained. And that's how the Lords figured in, Jacqueline deducted. Evie nodded. Apparently there was some agreement for me to marry Sebastian when he was just Evie paused, realizing she was the same age as Jacqueline when she was betrothed to Sebastian. Only in Jacqueline she became an orphan. When you were just what? The secret witch asked. I was 12. I was just 12 when my husband was chosen for me. 15 years later, I was sent here to take up that promise, and hopefully the money from my marriage would take my family out of this condition. It, it did help slightly, Evie said. Evie opened the door perfectly to the topic of Sebastian, Jacqueline's true reason for coming to Terramore. She wanted to know how more than ever if Evie was done with him. That way Jacqueline could truly feel the love she had for him without the fear of Evie would eventually come back and take him away. Did you love him? Jacqueline asked carefully as the small teacup covered her mouth, allowing the hot liquid to swoop down her mouth. Sebastian? Jacqueline. Sebastian. Evie took Evie looked around the room. She felt the quiet of the room. She felt that once she had it out loud, the truth about how she felt about Sebastian, it would sing from the room and out of the halls of town, where the truth is about how she felt about the man she married, lost twice to death, and had a child with. The truth, finally, Evie felt, would somehow hurt her. She didn't know why it would, but she knew it would hurt her. Yes, Evie said softly, I loved him with all my heart. From the moment I met him, actually, both times I met him. Jacqueline sat there frozen, hoping she would have said the opposite. I felt as if saying that tarnishes Matthew, Evie said, revealing why saying she loved Sebastian would hurt her. Why is that? Jacqueline said. Well, Sebastian and I had a tumultuous relationship with Matthew was sort of my savior. I lost them both, and I fell loving one over the other would somehow diminish the relationship of the other one. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I loved Sebastian and I loved Matthew. It was different, both of them, and the love for both was different, but real in both. Do you believe you can love two people? Evie asked. Jacqueline sensed Evie's passion. She could see why Sebastian adored her. She could see why Matthew adored her. There was a pureness of Evie's, something that came from the heart, and the most people lost when they grew up. It was a childlike pureness that died and withered as we grew, like the green grass outside was withering in the new, cold snow of winter. This trait, this pure whole soul, was it Sebastian loved and craved, and what Jacqueline lacked. But it wasn't something Jacqueline lacked because she was evil, but because Jacqueline grew up, like everyone else, and saw the darkness of the world firsthand. It was a something we all lose as we become jaded with age. But not Evie. She was a ray of light that never dimmed. And this pure heart was dangerous to the jaded one beating inside of Jacqueline, and Evie knew Sebastian was truly alive. Everything Jacqueline was building could crumble like a castle made of sand. Sometimes we can see the world from rose colored glass, Evie. In the tragedy of both of your relationships, perhaps there is a silver lining. Were they stepping stones to someone else, someone new, someone who will take you on some adventure that we're meant to be with? I think so, and yes, I think you can love perhaps two people, and perhaps three. Maybe there is someone else out there, Jacqueline said, hoping to persuade Evie to move on and forget Sebastian. Oh, I agree, and I think that third person is already in my sight, Evie replied. Jacqueline's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could her wish have so quickly come true? Love with Evie was in love with a new man. How could it have happened so perfectly? The new was a dream come true for Jacqueline, who suddenly felt herself easing in the chair. Then Jan walked in with little Gabriel in her arms through the library door behind Jacqueline. Here he is, Evie said, reaching for her baby, who snuggled in her arms. He's my new love. Lunch will be ready in a few hours, Miss Evie. Jane said. Thank you, Jan. Will you be joining us? She asked the maid. Something Evie did always was to ask the staff to join them at the table, never treating them as workers, but as friends and a family. Jane smiled. Not today, miss. Lots of work ahead of me. I'll have some time shortly before the family, but thank you. Evie smiled politely. As Jacqueline looked into the eyes of the beautiful boy she just a month earlier rendered death by a spell gone wrong. Evie cuddled her baby, kissed his pink cheeks, and Jacqueline could see it there again, shining sun inside Evie, the bright light that Sebastian adored so much, the one thing that would and could by possibly bring them back together and leave Jacqueline out in the cold, their child. Would you stay for lunch? Evie asked her new friend, Jacqueline, who smiled back precautiously. I would love to, Jacqueline said. Evie was thrilled, but Jacqueline's strong heart sank inside. She knew that if she wanted any kind of future with Sebastian and Welshport, free of the loneliness of Highgrove, free of pain of her past, free of things that made her ship adrift in the sea of life, she had to be sure to keep her beloved Sebastian away from not only his beloved Evie, but his little family forever. The witch's decision was made, and how cold, like the snow outside, was the blood running through Jacqueline's veins. Ice cold. Elsewhere in the mansion, Genevieve sorted through her things, preparing for the time that she'd finally leave Welshport in search of David Lord, the man who she so quickly fell in love with by the way of her passion and by the spirit of David's late wife Sabrina. The powerful Sabrina had over Genevieve was like the heat of the sun in the desert, intense and wavering constant. The photos of David of a stringent reality to Genevieve were like old friends to her now. She was truly in love with the man she never met, thanks to all the Sabrina's memories were now part of Genevieve's own mind. What's what's more, Genevieve wanted desperately to bring justice to David, who was framed for Sabrina's murder. The truth could come out once David had returned to the island he was born on, and so that he could face his brother Jacob, the true killer. I really don't want you to go, Morgan. Morden, slipping into his mother's room. The 13-year-old boy had only recently arrived at Terramore from San Francisco to be with his mother, And now she was leaving him on his this quest for David. Genevieve's heart broke seeing his sad face. I wish I could take you, honey, but this is something I have to do, Genevieve said. But why? He asked. Genevieve truly didn't know the answer to that. She was a woman dressed, a woman who had come to Welshport with a man she loved, Jonathan, but that love had soured, and now she was moving on to someone new, a person she didn't know personally, and if he was even alive, although Sabrina was admit he was. Sit down, honey, Genevieve said as she patted the empty sofa cushion next to her. Her son compelled. Do you remember when I at do you remember do you remember when a boy at school in San Francisco stole a toy from a friend of yours, and the boy who stole lied and blamed you? Morgan nodded yes. Remember how horrible it felt to be accused of something you didn't do, and how you wanted to do was show everyone and tell everyone who listened it was not you, that you were innocent? He nodded yes again. Well, that's sort of what I'm doing. I have important information about a horrible thing that happened to someone who was innocent. This man is kind and is loving and had well, absolutely nothing to do with the terrible event in his life, was accused of it. And he ran away and lost everything. He lost his family, his home, his friends, everything. I want to help him. I feel like I can really do it. But I can't do it from here. I have to go. I wish I could take you, honey, but you're safer here. Miss Lord said she'd watch over you, and I have no doubt your new friend Charlotte will take care of you too. Genevieve explained, albeit with many words it could have been Sabrina herself. But with who? Why is this? Why do you have to go? Morgan rightfully wondered. Genevieve wasn't sure how to answer without it sounding utterly insane. She couldn't be truthful. Tell him that the ghost that had lived in her, now that the dead woman that looked exactly like her was influencing her to do it. She wanted him to understand based on his own experience at school, but it wasn't enough. And of course, how could it be? He wanted to be with his mother, whom he was apart from for about almost 2 years. It would now be another long time apart, where letters back and forth would substitute for hugs and kisses, and the person, single mother, wanted to be careful. She wanted him to love her and to understand as best as she could, but most of all, to support her. It just has to be sometimes, Morgan. We were called to do things. Let's say support his own experience at school. So it just has to be sometimes, Morgan. We are called to do things we do not understand. Why is it? I know that what I am doing seems well stupid. Chicago. Morgan did too. But I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, my love, and I love you. And once this is all over, I'll be back, and things will be better than finding the man I'm going to help will be free. The three of us can be together. The three of us? Morgan asked. Genevieve smiled. I think he might want to join our little family. What do you think? I don't know him. You don't know him? How would? Why would? I'm so confused. Please don't go. Please don't leave me here. I don't know why you would want to help a stranger and leave me here. Genevieve grabbed her son's shaking hand. He was cold. He was feeling terribly lonely. And it was worse. He was feeling like this mother was abandoning him. And sure she was. It doesn't matter the reason. As righteous or ridiculous as it was to him, respectfully, Morgan, this is what I have to do, she said softly to her son, his eyes watering. I don't know. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I want to go with you. Take me, he begged. Darling, stop, just stop. Please, she began. cry too. Suddenly they fell into each other's arms. He crushed at his mother's strange decision to leave him. She begged for him to understand something she was feeling for a man she didn't know. This is all Sabrina's power over her, the ghost of a woman determined to find the truth for herself, for her soul, for the man she loved that was missing all these years, and also her own son Sebastian, who was too there somewhere. For Sebastian's part, he lived many years believing his father's guilt until only 2 years ago when Sabrina's ghost, was able to reveal the truth to him. But so many others, not only the Lord family, but all of Welshford, had only been as lucky as Sebastian to have met with the spirit of Sabrina. Everyone else still believed in David's guilt, and Genevieve was the final key to unlock this giant mischaracterization of justice for a dead woman on the beach 10 years earlier. As Genevieve rocked her crying 13-year-old son in her arms, she squashed his sobbing, kissed the top of his warm brown hair head, and it will all work out. And when we return, I will never let go of you again, she whispered. Promise, he asked through a sniffly nose. I promise. Where will you go? Where will you search for David Lord? Morgan asked. Sabrina inside of Genevieve knew she had always known. She had always felt David's energy alive, hiding secluded secretly in one place, a city overseas. A fog or salty air, much like Welshport, a village, a place like David felt at home because of those similarities. Now was Sabrina's only and lost opportunity to finally find him and bring him back to face Jacob. Finally, Sabrina replied Genevieve's young son with one word through her new lips, Genevieve's lips. London. Across the narrow icy channel that separated Welshport Island from the now snow-covered settler known as Good Island sat an oddly shaped cabin of 6 rooms. In the front room, Mary Good sat staring into the roaring fire that burned the night away. The clock continued to tick away the hours of the frosty winter night when the moon would soon dip below the sea, welcoming the new turn of the sun. But Mary's eyes were fixed on the fire, her heart lost in despair over what had happened to her cousin's child when Jacqueline's spell went Aurora, making him deaf. You're lost in thought again, Mary's beloved Philip said, handling her hot mug as she sat with her on the fluffy carpet in front of the earth. I feel so guilty, she whispered. He slapped a thick he slipped a thick strand of her bright blonde hair behind her and covered her face in a large hand, then lifted her chin so that their eyes would meet in the glowing flames of orange light. You didn't do anything wrong, Mary. I've told you that over and over again. We'll figure it out soon. Gabriel will be fine. We just have to keep looking for an answer. I just feel it's more than just what happened with the spell. What if it was a mistake? What if bringing Jacqueline here was a mistake? Maybe my mother was apart from her cousin sisters for a reason, Mary whispered again, so no one in the house would hear her. If that was true, she would have told you, right? Philip asked. I don't know. For years, she and I were somewhat estranged. I mean, we never went without speaking, but I didn't live here for many years. And I was very disconnected from all of her abilities. I didn't want to deal with any of it, no matter how many times she wanted to teach me. As I grew up, it just wasn't for me. And now I sit here in her place knowing what happened to my cousin's little child, and I'm hiding it from him. It's killing me. What if it happened to Charlotte, or even worse, to little babies growing inside of me? Mary explained. Mary, again, listen to me. I would never steer you wrong. We will. We have to wait. We have to continue to find some other way to reverse what Jacqueline did, and that'll be fine. There has to be a way, Philip replied optimistically. I don't know. She doesn't seem like she wants it. I don't know what it is, but something tells me she's sort of doing her own thing. When she told me she's befriended Evie, I was horrified. We told her to stay away. We told her just to stay clear of Caramore and anything connecting her to Gabriel. And she went ahead and befriended her. Doesn't that make you wonder? She could be a weak link, and if Sebastian is as volatile as I know he can be, she can get us all killed. Mary said. Philip lifted a brow. It did make him wonder. He was always suspicious of new people in the village, as something that he carried with him from being from such a small village. But in this particular instant, he never vocalized it. We just have to watch, Philip replied. We have to watch her and make sure she continues to listen to us and do what we asked and also kept her secret. Sebastian can never know what happened to Gabriel. It's important that she knows it and will keep explaining to in her own best interest to do that, Philip asked. She has to know that even without us. Tell her right? Mary asked. I don't know, Philip replied. She has to. Philip Sebastian can never know what we did. We'll lose him, and Evie will forever lose the father of her child, Mary said. You're right, and no matter what happens, she's connected to him. Their love for was ironclad, and just like our little baby coming soon, they made their own. That love needs to be protected. Even Jacqueline will understand that. There can't be any kind of good force here if we're doing things for our own good. It always has to be for the good of all of us. But how do we know she understands that? She tells us she does, but we don't really know anything about her, and she is here living in our house and in love with Sebastian. Even that her relationship with him, it seems so dangerous, so fragile. He is fragile. What happens if he finds out? My God, I don't even want to think about it. Mary replied, her heart pounding in her chest as they thought of Sebastian discovering what they had done. Listen, in the morning we'll talk to Jacqueline. It's as simple as well. We will just tell her again what we need to do for the good of all of us. As she has to agree, Philip answered. And if she doesn't? Mary wondered as she sipped the tea Philip brought her. Philip didn't answer. He had an answer. He was only hoping for Jacqueline's sake she would agree to leave anyone related to Sebastian's life at Terramore alone. No more visits with Evie. No more seeing Gabriel. No more. But in the shadows, Jacqueline listened. She was not asleep as if Philip and Mary believed. She saw in their holding of the secret of what happened wasn't about their own safety as much as it was preserving the strong bond between Sebastian and Evie, a bond that clearly excluded Jacqueline. This did not sit well with the new witch in town. Jacqueline quietly let herself back into Sebastian's room, where he was adjusting the shirt in the black, thick jacket with a high collar. She came from behind and hugged him tightly. She could feel every strong muscle in his body. His arms were like marble, his chest like a statue of David's. It's going to be a cold out there, Jacqueline said, knowing Sebastian was ready to go out into the night to feed. And blood is the only safe thing I can drink. The alternative is, Sebastian paused. I'd rather be in a cold searching for a poor rabbit than the alternative, Sebastian explained. I was thinking, what if we went back to Boston? It's a big city. We could hide there. I still have my family's house. We could live there for the rest of our lives, and no one would ever care about who or what disappeared in the middle of the night, Jacqueline half joked. Go to Boston and eat people, Sebastian said, chuckling. Sure, she giggled, back kissing his cold neck. Sebastian shook his head. What is this? Why are you still awake? It's getting late. I don't know, she said, her heart worried about the Philip and Mary were planning. I've just been thinking so much about the future, and now it's been so good with you so far. I think we'd be happier far away from here, she said, hoping he'd suddenly agree to her spontaneous request. No, no, I couldn't leave, not now, he answered, standing at the buttoning his jacket. But why? She replied, like a spoiled child. Jacqueline, I have a son now, and even if I thought I can't raise him or see him, I can at least stay close. Sometimes I can see him, when he sleeps, or he's out in the evening with his mother. No one can see me when I hide. I can always raise him from afar. I have to be there for Evie too. Sebastian smiled proudly as he thought of Gabriel and mother of his child. Jacqueline frowned. What is it? He asked. I think it would be better if we left, she replied, her tone of voice now lacking the childlike glimmer for just moments ago. Her eyes, a deep brown, looked darker to him when he was in the when he was in this mood. He hadn't seen this side of her yet. At the mention of Gabriel and Evie, it was clear that it was because of them she wanted to leave, but Sebastian would not budge. He would never leave them, no matter how far away he had to stand. Be, he would stand there, not to leave. You're being silly, a child. You're not. You know how important my son is to me, Sebastian replied. And Evie, she asked. She's the mother of my child, he said back quickly. And now that he's protected by your spell, then I don't really have to worry all that so much. So you don't have to worry about me being more occupied with them and not with you. Maybe that is what your worry is, but not the spell of protection, but there is for me when I cannot. Jack gulped, knowing the truth. Sebastian, I have to tell you something, she said. Sebastian, who had turned from her after his last few words to reach for what hat, slowly turned back. When her voice clearly now in a third tone, serious, he sat down on the edge of their unmade bed and replied coldly, "It's about the spell you marry, wanted Mary to carry out to protect your son. It's not." She paused. "Tell me," he shouted. "It didn't work. Mary lied. It's a lie. She failed, and it backfired on us. And she's been lying to you." Jacqueline heard words come from her mouth, but she didn't believe it was her. She couldn't believe she had just lied, and for what? For protection. She knew that Philip and Mary were somewhat on to her. She knew that there was troubling brewing for her. She knew that it was going to continue to keep lies going, that the child was fine, that he could eventually find out that she was part of the lie, and she'd lose everything and probably reveal himself to Evie as being alive, and that they reunite. She wanted to expose the lie, reveal the truth, and force him to only trust her. She wanted Sebastian to think she was the truthful one. She wanted Sebastian to only want her to help her, only seek her. But in that moment, Sebastian's cold blooded turned to ice. He threw the hat in his hand across the room. He leaped off the bed almost as if they were to leap out of the window. She stared at his eyes that turned back. He fell back into the ground of the bedroom, snarked in her face, inches away from each other, so close she could feel his breath on his lip. What do you mean backfired? The spell was meant for Gabriel to hear no evil, to protect him from any other evil spell that could touch his ears. Instead, it became interpreted by Mary, and I was interrupted by Mary, and I was only able to say out loud for the boy not to hear. Sebastian, this made the boy deaf. He can't hear. She's taken away his hearing, Jacqueline explained. Sebastian hissed at her, but his anger was confused. Should be anger and Jacqueline or Mary. Which one cast the spell? Which one did it? He couldn't make his heads or tails that was furious to understand. The lie had been spread as they were covering up something terrible that happened to his little boy. Undo it, he snarled again. I can't. It can't be, she replied. Liar, he yelled. She bowed her head. It can't be undone, Sebastian. I've tried, but Mary, she wanted me to never tell you. She wanted you to never know. I wanted to tell you, but I did, but I didn't want to betray anyone. She made me not tell. This is her fault, she interrupted me. She wanted me to never tell you what she did and what happened to Gabriel because Sebastian was her fault. Mary Jacqueline, she exposing her newfound coven sister. Sebastian felt his heart crack. He was furious. He was going to kill them. He was going to rip their throats out. Both Philip and Mary. They lied. They forced Jacqueline to lie. He was angry. His fangs begged for flesh to pierce. He paced through like a tiger trapped in a cage. He removed his coat, throwing it to the corner. The candles flickered back and forth, following the air and surrounded his body. He wanted to kill them all. Jacqueline, too, who sat straight up in the chair, wondered what he'd do next. But she felt safe. She thought it Mary and Philip's plan to contain her and protect the connection between Sebastian and his ex-wife. She could not be contained, and she would not allow for any relationship with Sebastian. So Sabrina to be pushed aside as Philip and Mary were clearly attempting to do by keeping the secret and what happened with Gabriel. For Sebastian's sake and Amy's, Jacqueline would not be controlled by any of them. Exposing the truth, albeit putting her in a bad light too, put her 2 steps ahead of Mary and Philip's plan. Sebastian snarled and hissed. He looked as if he was about to attack her in the fear of 1,000 hurricanes, but suddenly, just before she thought it was going to come at her throat, he pulled down the wooden panels ceiling, concealing his windows, and opened the shutters, and jumped out of the window into the wild, windy night, with snow snarling around him, icy burst or cold, wind or sleet. Jacqueline rushed to the window and searching for the angry Sebastian, he was gone in the dark. In the front room, Mary heard the commotion from the bedroom, and her heart skipped a beat, not knowing what fresh hell was coming with the winter winds. Okay, guys, that's a read along. Really, really, really good. I'm curious that this Caspian line. That's for sure. We know Jacqueline's line. So, all right. Link to Benight and Beguile is going to be in the description box, guys. You guys have a good day.